We're going to dive into that a little bit as we share our early takeaways of fall camp. And early on, it was SMU getting out into shells and kind of moving around out there. But the big thing that stood out right away is this defensive front. And you talk about having Elijah Roberts back in the fold and his size, his ability to run in space, as you saw if you're watching on YouTube, and the entire defensive line's ability to control what the offensive line does is really impressive. And we know that Justin Osborne has a lot of expectations on him as a starting center. We know there are some big name transfers and big name players that are back for SMU on the offensive line. But the reality is this defensive line goes three deep. And last year, we were in fall camp watching SMU and saying, okay, is the offensive line going to be this massive issue? No, that was the defensive line being that good early on in fall camp and really stepping up. And that carried the season, right? That was SMU's calling card and really shown in the AAC championship game just how impressive they were in dominating Michael Pratt and that Tulane offense. Now, things change quickly in this sport with the transfer portal. And what SMU did was they went out and just addressed the defensive line even more so than they did last year preparing for the 2023 season. They went out and they grabbed Jared Harrison Hunt at the end of the transfer portal season. They went out and brought in Blake Burris this summer, and he, committed earlier but got to campus this summer. And they have so many big, strong guys on that defensive line. Jonathan Jefferson, Omari Abor on the edge. They were able to go out and grab Jafari Harvey, who was here in the spring, and add a talented player like Billy Walton, who's young, who's got athleticism, Mike Lockhart, Tank Booker, so many just big name transfers from power conference schools that, again, have really reshaped how you've got to view this defensive line, even though you know that last year they were a strength of the team. Last year they were able to control the line of scrimmage. But with these big guys up front, SMU is ready for the Power Four ranks. And that is going to be a unit that keeps SMU in games this fall and is able to get them to a point where they don't necessarily need to rely on the glaring, I would say, question mark of this defense, which is your cornerback room, because they're going to be able to control the line of scrimmage for the most part. Now, they're going to face Florida State. They're going to face Louisville. They're going to face some teams with some quality offensive linemen. There's no question about that. But what SMU has is depth and talent. And if you're a premium On3 YouTube or On the Pony Express YouTube subscriber, or if you are at onthePonyExpress.com, we'll break down the depth chart, our early projections for that, and share some notes. But it's almost incomplete because I try to go through it too deep just to give you guys an idea of what to expect from SMU's position groups, where they stand. This defensive line is really three deep. And you go across the board. Elijah Roberts is the star at strong side defensive end. You also have Omari Abor, David Abiara. And if you're an On the Pony Express subscriber, you knew that SMU was moving Cam Robertson over from Bandit to play more strong side defensive end. So all of a sudden, they have 3 or 4 guys there that they feel really good about. Tank Booker, as you're watching on the screen there, he just did a rep early on in fall camp. He is your nose tackle, big, strong guy with Jonathan Jefferson right behind him. Blake Burris, who's going to play some special teams for SMU as well. But all 3 of those guys, big, strong players. And then you get into Jared Harrison Hunt, who I would expect to be your starting 3 tech at the defensive tackle spot. And then you have Mike Lockhart. You have Corey Roberson. You just have so many faces to this defense that, I mean, it just that those 3 guys that are hand in the dirt players at all times, SMU's just got so much depth. It's scary, quite honestly. And so they really have revamped that group well, and it takes an NIL commitment. So that is something that SMU's been able to really step up and do. And it's going to pay off. Jafari Harvey at the Bandit spot. Him and Isaiah Smith look great in practice. And then you have Billy Walton looking like a a future piece that they picked up in the transfer portal that's really, really nice. So a lot of good has come from SMU's work in the transfer portal. And, I feel really good about this defense and what they're going to be able to do because they have so much depth on that defensive line. Quite frankly, it's sick, and they deserve the first 10 minutes, 8 minutes with the ad read taken out of this podcast. That's how good they've been. When you continue on the defense, it is the group that I just feel like they have so much to offer to this team this year. They're a confident group. We got to talk with Maurice Crum, the co-defensive coordinator today, and two of his linebackers, Kobe Wilson and Ahmad Walker, and they were talking to us about, last year they were an unknown. They were really a group that had a lot of new faces. The storyline was Ahmad Walker being, Scott Simon's former middle linebacker, and he had, jump-started his career early on as a freshman, and Jaquanis Burns, could he pan out? And Kobe Wilson was kind of tossed in late in the transfer portal season. Alex Kilgore was a promising freshman. They went out and shattered all expectations for that group last year. And sure, it helps having a nice defensive line to play behind, but they are a strong point of this defense this year. They have two guys that they really trust in Kobe Wilson and Ahmad Walker, who, as Maurice Crum puts it, they both have boulders on their shoulders. And I think that mindset goes a long way for this team. We were talking with, Jonathan McGill and Isaiah Wacobia, and so many of these leaders of this team throughout fall camp have talked about how they have to raise their level of expectations and raise the standard. That's their phrase this year for the team, is raise it. And that's something that I think fits this season perfectly for SMU, because if they go out and have a good season and they win 9+ games, it's going to be because they raised the standard of play. They raised the expectations around the program, and the guys bought in. And again, there are things that this team will have to figure out. But the defense has really bought into, okay, great season last year. One, they really take the mindset of their coach, Scott Simons, on their defense coordinator. They're never really satisfied. I'm sure they celebrated a little bit after the AAC championship game, but there wasn't too much time to look back and say, wow, oh my gosh, look at what SMU's defense did, and revamped the perception of SMU as this offensive school that's produced playmakers through the years. Now they have depth, they have talent, and they have skins on the wall to show that they're one of the best defenses in college football. Scott Simons is one of the best defensive coordinators in college football. There's a reason why he was mentioned with numerous defensive coordinator openings over the course of the offseason. But he wants to be at SMU, and he wants to make this defense, once again, take the next step, because I'm sure Scott Simons has head coach aspirations. Pretty much every coach I know in America wants to have a head job. And if Scott Simons is going to get there one day, making it work at the ACC level is going to accelerate that. And so SMU, you got to enjoy the ride that is the Scott Simons defense as he's here. And he has a group that is just really motivated, once again, to prove people wrong, to carry this team. And the secondary, I think, is really not a question at the safety position. A very, very good group that is coming back for SMU, but they do have some players that are certainly going to need to step up. There's no doubt about that at the corner position. And as you're watching one-on-ones, there is right off the bat a couple young players getting some work in there by some veteran receivers. But it's a group that has a lot of talent, has a lot of experience still. And one thing SMU did to help that secondary is they moved Brandon Crosley over to cornerback, and he is super competitive. He is one of the top players at SMU in terms of talking trash and bringing it every day. And I think that's important for people to realize too, is that SMU did a nice job creating depth, creating competition. They brought in Alex Rogers, and they brought in Speedy Nettles this offseason as two freshmen that are going to continue to get better and potentially, especially with Speedy with his size, play. But the biggest thing that happened this offseason is it seems like Deuce Harmon really stepped up to the plate. And we talked with Ricky Hundley on, I want to say, Monday at his media availability. And he spoke about that and kind of buying in and being up to the standard that they have as far as being a teammate and being accountable. And you factor in Deuce Harmon along with a veteran like Jahari Rogers and two hungry guys in Smoke, Jalen Davis Robinson, for those who don't know, and AJ Davis. And this cornerback room, when you add in Brandon Crosley, all of a sudden has a lot of competition, needs to put its own skins on the wall like the linebacker group did last year. But they're feeling better about the unit, I would say, than before fall camp started. This was a group that they were going out and trying to find new players to bring in for the transfer portal. They couldn't end up finding anyone just yet to get into the mix that they really felt comfortable adding into this defensive, room, this cornerback room that wouldn't, upset the culture that is there. Because you look out there on day one, Jahari Rogers is coaching up Speedy Nettles and Alex Rogers on how to do drills and how to do it the right way. And that's what good teammates do, is they help each other. And now that doesn't mean that Jahari Rogers can go out there and help Speedy Nettles break up passes and play with good technique. But that's the level of buy-in that Ricky Hundley was talking about that SMU has defensively. They're able to help each other and feel better about the team's direction because they do help each other. And we've seen them steadily show why they're maybe not as big of a glaring weakness as people think. There is certainly proof that needs to be shown on the field, because you don't have Charles Woods, you don't have Chris Megginson, you don't have those two proven starters over multiple years for SMU and in college football coming in. What you have is Deuce Harmon, who started on a very good Texas A&M defense. You have Jahari Rogers, who's played a lot of football for SMU. You have Jalen Davis Robinson. You have AJ Davis. They're now veterans. I mean, they're experienced college football players. So for the secondary to take the next step is probably the biggest thing that needs to happen for SMU, quite frankly. They have to step up. But when you have a safety room that has so much depth and talent, that Scott Simons and his staff said, you know what? We're going to move Brandon Crosley over to corner because we have CJ Sanders, who we love. And if you talk with players, they're going to tell you that CJ Sanders might be the best defensive back SMU has. But he also has Jaden Milner-Jones playing right there at nickel. He has Kyron Chambers playing at nickel. Abdul Muhammad had a pick six on the first day of practice at nickel in the team period. So there's competition, there's depth. And then you have Ahmad Moses, you have Jonathan McGill, you have Isaiah Wacobia, you have all sorts of talent at the safety position. And that's a group that they needed to find ways to tweak it and help get other guys on the field. And there are guys that are proving that they deserve to be on the field, and that's what they're doing by moving a Brandon Crosley over to corner. So through the first week of practice, I tell you what, it's hard for this offense to accomplish some of the looks and feel things that they want to, because this defense is so good, and in particular the defensive line.